Prince George heard 6 words that shattered the royal family's future in seconds, 6 words he was never meant to hear. And the most frightening part wasn't only what they said, but what they implied, and the fact that everyone inside Windsor Castle would pretend nothing had happened. It was a cold December morning at Windsor, the kind where frost clung to the gardens like delicate lace, and the old stone corridors seemed to hold onto every breath. Even the palace silence felt different, deeper, heavier, like the building itself was listening. George was only 7, still young enough to believe routines were unbreakable. Breakfast finished neatly, shoes polished until they gleamed, a school bag held in small hands, being trained for responsibility long before he could understand it. He walked through the corridor the way he always did, steady and familiar, until the air shifted and he felt it, instantly, in the way adults moved just a little too carefully, in the way smiles arrived a beat too late. Then it happened. A few quiet words, spoken so softly they should have been harmless, landed like a stone dropped into still water. Maria, his nanny, the one who had watched over him and his siblings for years, spoke to someone just around the corner. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't panic, but it cracked in that subtle way adults can't always hide when they're trying to keep something from breaking. It's confirmed, it's not temporary anymore. 6 words, simple, controlled, final. George didn't fully understand the meaning in an adult way, but his body understood before his mind could catch up. His chest tightened, his stomach dropped, and the calm morning inside the castle shattered. He stopped mid-step, frozen, the hallway suddenly stretching long and polished around him like a tunnel with no end. His mind rushed to the only place it could go, his little brother. Prince Louis had been different lately, not dramatically, nothing a stranger would notice, but different in the way family always notices first. Quieter, more withdrawn, skipping moments that used to belong to him, mischief, laughter, the restless energy that made him feel like sunshine moving through a room. Instead, Louis had been curling under blankets, sitting out games, letting Charlotte run ahead without him. George had noticed, of course. He had even asked small questions when he thought no one was listening, but now the truth, even incomplete, struck like thunder. He didn't cry loudly. The tears came slowly, as if even his grief was trying to obey palace rules. His shoulders trembled with silent sobs he tried to swallow down, but the fear was too big for his small chest. Maria reached out instinctively, her hand brushing his arm, gentle and grounding, but George barely felt it. All he could think was that different might not go away, that something permanent had entered their lives without permission. When he finally lifted his face, his voice was barely more than air. "Does Mum know?" Maria didn't rush her answer. She chose her words carefully, the way adults do when every syllable carries consequences. "Yes," she said softly. "She's known for a while." It didn't comfort him, it made everything more real. If his mother had known, then this wasn't new. It had been living among them for weeks, hiding behind routines and smiles and carefully rehearsed normal. And George realized something no child should have to realize. The adults weren't only protecting Louis, they were protecting everyone from the truth. Later that morning, Catherine found George curled up in a sitting room, hands clasped so tightly his fingers had gone pale, eyes wide and distant as if he was staring at a future he couldn't name. She didn't speak immediately. She sat beside him, steady and warm, letting the silence hold what words couldn't. When George finally whispered the question that had been tearing at him, it came out small and trembling. "Will he get better?" Catherine held her breath for a moment, just long enough for George to see she was choosing honesty over comfort. "He'll have to live with this," she said gently, "but we're going to be right beside him every step of the way." The words were simple, yet they carried the kind of weight that changes a child's understanding of the world. George finally saw it clearly. This wasn't a passing season, not a short sickness that would fade after a few more naps. Their life had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. The official confirmation arrived quietly, almost invisibly, as if it hoped to slip past the grandeur of the castle unnoticed. A plain courier delivered a plain envelope with typed pages inside, pages no parent ever wants to read. Catherine opened it alone in her private sitting room, the only sound the faint crackle of the fireplace. Her hands didn't tremble, her posture didn't collapse, but inside something irreversible took hold. The language was clinical and final. A chronic condition, long-term care, stress M. Management essential. Words designed to inform, yet each sentence landed like a hammer in her chest. She had seen signs in Louis for weeks, tiny differences that could be dismissed as tiredness or growing pains. Shorter walks, earlier naps, a faint tremor that appeared and vanished, a laugh that didn't come as easily, a child who retreated into quiet corners where mischief used to live. Like so many parents, Catherine had hoped, perhaps unconsciously, that it was temporary, that her boy would wake up and be fully himself again, bright, wild, unstoppable. But the envelope offered no temporary, no wait and see, no promise of a return to the old normal. It wasn't the end of their family, it was the beginning of a new reality. When William returned later from London, he walked into a home that had already changed. The silence wasn't just quiet, it felt present, heavy, almost sacred. Catherine handed him the envelope without speaking. He read it once, then again, as if staring longer could undo what was written. When he finally looked up, he didn't ask about schedules or public response. He asked the only question that mattered to him as a father. How much do the children know? Catherine shook her head. Not enough, and in that moment, the decision settled over them like a storm cloud. How do you tell children that life won't follow ordinary expectations anymore, that forever is now part of the conversation, even if no one wants it to be? Inside the palace, the shifts began immediately. Meetings were rescheduled, events postponed, school pickups rearranged. Staff spoke in softer tones and ended conversations mid-sentence when children appeared. The air itself seemed heavier, loaded with unspoken truth. Tradition, ceremony, and public perception quietly moved down the list. Survival rose to the top. Emotional safety, care, the creation of a home that could hold fear without breaking became the new protocol. For George, the realization cut the deepest. The grief he tried to hide followed him everywhere. At school, he withdrew. The boy who once raised his hand and laughed at recess, now staring out windows like he was searching for answers beyond the classroom walls. At home, routines that once anchored him dissolved into uneasy silence. Breakfast grew quiet. Evenings felt lonelier. The laughter that had once echoed down palace corridors became cautious, muted, as if joy itself had become fragile. Charlotte tried to reach him in the only ways she knew. Gentle touches, whispered jokes, small reassurances that didn't demand explanations. But George wasn't being cruel or distant out of malice. He was carrying a weight too heavy for his age, a secret that didn't fit inside him. Even Maria, who had weathered royal tour, press storms, and crises the public never saw, felt unprepared. Nothing trains you to watch one child's light dim, while another child's grief silently deepens, and a family recalibrates around a truth that cannot be undone. As the days passed, Catherine began watching George more closely. She noticed patterns, fractures in his rhythm, the way he tried to be brave and failed in quiet moments. One evening, she suggested something simple, a family activity, a board game, a movie, anything to pull them back toward one another. William brought a game. Louis joined cautiously, leaning on Charlotte at times. Charlotte tried to keep it light. But George stayed silent, excused himself early, and retreated upstairs to his room, where he opened an old photo album filled with brighter days. Louis laughing on a beach, building sandcastles, running without hesitation. George wept quietly and whispered words that felt too heavy for any child to say. I should have known. That night, Catherine sat at the foot of his bed and did not try to fix him with words. She listened, letting the fear finally have a voice. When George admitted he didn't know how to help Louis, Catherine gave him the simplest truth. You don't have to fix it, she said softly. You just have to love him. And for George, that shifted everything. Love wasn't a cure, love was presence. Love was staying. Love was reading a story even when your throat was tight and your hands were shaking. Quietly, Maria approached Catherine with an observation that felt more like a warning than advice. They know more than we realize, she said. They're hurting and they need guidance. Catherine, exhausted yet resolute, whispered back, so do I. That night, a plan began to form, not for cameras, not for optics, not for headlines, but for their children. They created spaces where the family could reconnect without performance, painting sessions, story hours, evening walks, moments designed to let love exist without being staged. Slowly, the palace shifted from a fortress of tradition into a sanctuary for emotional survival. Then came the day the public statement was released, and the world paused. Windsor, usually a symbol of distance and ceremony, became a center of global attention, not for scandal but for raw humanity. The message did not read like a decree. It read like a family speaking from the heart, stripped of performance and formality. George watched quietly, still processing his own storm, but he could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't about reputation, it was about protecting Louis from rumor, speculation, and misinterpretation. The response was immediate. Major outlets covered the news with restraint. Social media filled with messages of support. Outside the palace gates, ordinary people left candles, children's drawings, and handwritten notes. One small sign written in a child's handwriting read, "Be strong, Lou Bug, we love you." Catherine reportedly saw it from a car window and turned away, not overwhelmed by attention, but by the depth of kindness aimed at a child she would do anything to shield. But not all reactions were gentle. Tabloids demanded details, speculated, implied secrets. The family did not respond. Silence became strategy, not out of avoidance but out of protection. Inside, life recalibrated again. Routines started later. Outdoor breaks lasted longer. School schedules were adjusted. A private counselor trained for long-term support was brought in. Public appearances were assessed case by case, with one priority guiding every decision: Louis's well-being, not the world's appetite for information. And in the days that followed, healing began quietly, slowly, in small moments that would never make headlines. George started visiting Louis's room each night. He read stories, shared memories, sat beside him when words didn't come easily. They played board games, laughed cautiously, rebuilt trust in the space between them. Louis, still fragile but determined, responded to every gesture of care as if it mattered, because it did. Charlotte, perceptive as ever, became a gentle bridge, offering encouragement and softening tense moments with small kindnesses. The siblings were discovering one another again, learning that love could exist alongside fear, grief, and uncertainty. Even Maria felt the shift. She was no longer only a nanny, she had become an anchor, helping the family navigate something no protocol had prepared them for. And Catherine and William, balancing duty with unwavering focus on their children, learned in real time that crowns do not cancel pain and titles do not protect hearts. The palace walls, once symbols of tradition and ceremony, became the quiet theater of courage, resilience, and intimacy, hidden from the world but witnessed by the people who truly mattered. Because this story isn't a scandal, it's a human drama unfolding behind royal walls, revealing the same fragility and strength that exist in every family, no matter how public their lives appear. For George, Louis, and Charlotte, it became an early lesson in courage, love, and the limits of control. For Catherine and William, it became a reminder that even the most powerful titles in the world cannot shield a family from illness, grief, and fear. And in the end, what remains isn't spectacle, it's patience, understanding, and emotional presence. Small gestures that restore hope, siblings reconnecting, parents learning to listen, a family choosing humanity over image even when the world is watching. And it leaves us with questions that don't have easy answers. How do families in the public eye balance privacy with public expectation? How much should the media share when children are involved? And for George and Louis, what will the next chapters of their lives hold, shaped by love but inevitably shadowed by uncertainty? If you enjoy in-depth coverage of the stories shaping celebrity culture and entertainment, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next one.